The security footage was crystal clear: Karen climbing over my fence at 2 a.m., stumbling drunk toward my pool, then the splash that would change everything. But what the cameras captured next, her frantic climb out, the way she looked directly at the lens and the cold calculation in her eyes, that's when I knew this wasn't just about a midnight swim. 3 months later, as she sat across from me in that courthouse, her lawyer's confident smirk dissolving into horror, I finally understood the true depth of her scheme. Because sometimes the truth has a way of surfacing just like bodies in water. Michael Chen had always prided himself on being a good neighbor. In the 3 years since he'd moved to Maple Grove Drive, he'd helped elderly Mrs. Peterson with her groceries, organized block parties, and even loaned his pressure washer to half the street. His backyard was his sanctuary, a modest above-ground pool surrounded by carefully tended flower beds and a small deck where he'd spent countless evenings reading after long days at the accounting firm. But all of that changed the day Karen Whitmore moved in next door. The moving truck had barely pulled away before the complaint started. His music was too loud at 7 p.m. His hedge was 3 inches over the property line. His outdoor lights were invasive to her privacy. Michael had tried to be understanding at first, even trimming back the hedge and installing softer lighting. But Karen's demands only escalated. "That pool is an eyesore," she declared on a sweltering Tuesday morning in July, standing at his back gate with her arms crossed. Karen was in her early 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of sharp features that seemed perpetually arranged in disapproval. "It's bringing down property values." Michael had been skimming leaves from the water, enjoying the peaceful morning before work. "It's well maintained and up to code, Karen. I have all the permits. Permits don't make it any less ugly." She gestured dismissively at the pool. "This is a respectable neighborhood. That thing belongs in a trailer park." The casual cruelty of the comment stung. Michael had saved for 2 years to afford the pool, working overtime and skipping vacations. It wasn't the largest or fanciest, but it was his. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he said, keeping his voice level. "But it's on my property, and it's staying." Karen's expression hardened. "We'll see about that." Over the following weeks, the harassment intensified. She filed noise complaints about his pool pump, despite it being whisper quiet and running during permitted hours. She reported him to the Homeowners Association for aesthetic violations, forcing him to attend meetings and defend his pool's right to exist. When that failed, she called the city inspectors, who found nothing wrong but cost Michael a day off work to be present. The breaking point came on a Saturday evening in late August. Michael was hosting a small barbecue for his co-workers, nothing wild, just 8 people enjoying burgers and conversation by the pool. The music was low, the gathering quiet and civilized. But at exactly 9 p.m., Karen appeared at her fence. "Some of us are trying to sleep," she shouted over the gentle hum of conversation. Michael's colleague Sarah raised an eyebrow. "It's Saturday night. And it's 9 o'clock. I don't care what night it is. This is a residential neighborhood, not a fraternity house." Michael walked over to the fence, his patience finally fraying. "Karen, we are not being loud. We are having a quiet dinner. Your definition of quiet and mine are very different." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Michael said, surprising himself with the edge in his voice. "They'll tell you the same thing they told you the last 3 times, we're not violating any ordinances." Karen's face flushed red. "You think you can just do whatever you want because you have that stupid pool? Well, I've got news for you, Michael. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." She stormed back to her house, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Michael's friends exchanged glances, the festive mood thoroughly killed. "Dude," said his friend Jake, "that woman is unhinged." Michael nodded, but something in Karen's tone had sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't just anger, it was something colder, more calculating. Like she already had a plan. The next morning, Michael found his pool skimmer basket destroyed, the plastic cracked and torn. Later that week, someone threw dog waste over his fence. The incidents were small but constant, a drip of harassment that left him on edge. He Installed security cameras more for peace of mind than anything else. It was a decision that would save his life. September brought a brief reprieve. Karen seemed to lose interest in her campaign of petty terrorism, and Michael began to hope she'd found a new target for her misery. He was wrong. On a crisp Friday evening in early October, Michael was working late at the office when his phone buzzed with a motion alert from his security system. The notification showed a figure in his backyard, but the image was too dark to make out details. Assuming it was a raccoon or neighborhood cat, he dismissed it and returned to his spreadsheets. The next morning, he found his pool gate wide open. The lock hadn't been forced, someone had known exactly how to unlatch it. Michael frowned, checking the security footage from the night before. The cameras had captured something that made his blood run cold. At 11:47 p.m., Karen Whitmore had climbed over his fence. She'd spent nearly 20 minutes in his yard, testing the pool gate, examining the deck, and most disturbingly, studying his security cameras with the focused attention of someone planning something. She'd been completely sober, methodical, and deliberate. Michael's first instinct was to call the police, but he hesitated. What crime had she actually committed? Trespassing, maybe, but would they take it seriously? Karen had a talent for making him look like the unreasonable one, and he could already imagine her tearful performance about being intimidated by her aggressive neighbor. Instead, he decided to confront her directly. He'd show her the footage, make it clear he knew what she was doing, and hopefully end this madness once and for all. Karen answered her door in a silk robe, her face a mask of innocent confusion. Michael? What's wrong? You look upset. We need to talk. He held up his phone, the security footage paused at the moment she'd climbed his fence. About last night. For just a second, her mask slipped. Michael saw something predatory flash in her eyes before the concerned neighbor expression returned. I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. Karen, I have you on camera. Trespassing in my yard. Testing my pool gate. What were you doing? She studied the phone screen, her expression shifting from confusion to embarrassment. Oh my God, Michael, I'm so sorry. I'd had a few glasses of wine and I thought I heard something. I was worried someone was breaking into your house. It was a practiced lie, delivered with just the right amount of shame and concern. But Michael had seen the footage. Karen hadn't been checking for burglars, she'd been casing his property. Stay out of my yard, Karen. I mean it. Of course, she said, her voice full of wounded sincerity. I'm so embarrassed. I was just trying to be a good neighbor. Michael walked away, but he could feel her eyes on his back. The predatory gleam had returned, and now she wasn't bothering to hide it. 2 weeks later, his security system alerted him again. This time, the notification came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Michael was in bed, but the urgent buzzing of his phone jolted him awake. Multiple cameras were triggering simultaneously, indicating significant movement in his backyard. He grabbed his phone and pulled up the live feed. What he saw made his heart stop. Karen was in his pool. She was thrashing in the water, her clothes soaked, her carefully styled hair plastered to her head. But something was wrong with the scene. Her movements were too deliberate, too controlled. She wasn't drowning, she was performing. Michael watched in horrified fascination as Karen positioned herself near the pool's edge, then began to struggle more dramatically. She was facing away from the main camera, but her body language was all wrong. This wasn't panic, it was choreography. Then she turned toward the camera, and Michael saw her face. Even in the grainy night vision, her expression was calculating, focused. She wasn't a victim, she was an actress hitting her mark. Karen hauled herself out of the pool with surprising ease for someone who'd supposedly just nearly drowned. She stood dripping on his deck, looking directly at the camera, and Michael realized with growing horror that she was smiling. She knew he was watching. She wanted him to watch. The next morning, Michael found his backyard transformed into a crime scene. Not by police, by Karen herself. She'd scattered her belongings around the pool area, a broken heel, a torn piece of fabric, even what looked like blood on the pool's edge. The performance was complete. At 7 a.m. sharp, his doorbell rang. Karen stood on his porch in a different outfit, her hair dry and perfectly styled, holding a manila envelope. "Michael," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured trauma. "I need to give you this." Inside the envelope was a notice from her lawyer. Karen Whitmore was suing Michael Chen for $500,000 in damages, claiming negligence, premises liability, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to the complaint, she'd been attacked in his yard the previous night, fallen into his improperly secured pool, and suffered severe physical and psychological trauma. Michael stared at the papers, his mind reeling. "You swin." Michael's hands shook as he dialed his insurance company from his kitchen table, the lawsuit papers spread before him like a death sentence. The backup recording system hummed quietly in the background, uploading the previous night's footage to a secure cloud server, evidence that could destroy Karen's case if he could prove its authenticity. "State Farm, this is Jennifer. How can I help you?" "I need to report a claim. Someone is suing me for an incident on my property." Michael's voice cracked. "But it's not what it seems." Within hours, his homeowner's insurance had assigned an adjuster and recommended a defense attorney. Robert Castellanos was a sharp-eyed man in his 40s who specialized in premises liability cases. He arrived at Michael's house that afternoon, his expression grave. "I'll be honest with you, Michael. These slip-and-fall cases are tough to defend, especially when there's water involved. Juries sympathize with injured parties." "But she wasn't injured," Michael protested. "She planned the whole thing. Look at this footage." Castellanos reviewed the security recordings with the clinical detachment of a surgeon. His expression shifted as he watched Karen's midnight reconnaissance mission, then her calculated performance in the pool. "This is unusual," he admitted. "But it's going to be hard to prove premeditation. Her lawyer will argue she was confused, disoriented. Maybe she'd been drinking. She wasn't drunk during the first visit. Look how methodical she was, studying the cameras, testing the gate. We'll need more than this. Security footage can be manipulated, and her attorney will challenge its authenticity. Do you have any other evidence of her pattern of behavior?" Michael thought of the months of harassment, the destroyed property, the constant complaints. "She's been harassing me for months. I can document everything." "Good. Start making a timeline. We need to establish motive." Castellanos packed away his tablet. "And Michael, don't talk to anyone about this case. Not friends, not family, not social media. Karen's people will be watching everything you do." But Karen wasn't waiting for the legal process to unfold. She was already building her narrative. The next morning, Michael discovered her Facebook post had gone viral in their neighborhood group. The photos were devastating: Karen in a hospital gown, her face artfully bruised, and 4 tube in her arm. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. "Last night was the most terrifying experience of my life. I heard what sounded like a break-in at my neighbor's house and went to check if he was okay. I fell into his unsecured pool and nearly drowned. The paramedics said I was unconscious for several minutes. I'm grateful to be alive, but I'm shocked by the dangerous conditions some people maintain in our neighborhood. Please be careful around 47 Maple Grove Drive. #neighborhood safety, #trauma recovery." The comments were an avalanche of sympathy and outrage. Neighbors Michael had known for years were calling him reckless, negligent, a danger to the community. Mrs. Peterson, who he'd helped with groceries for 3 years, posted, "I always thought that pool was an accident waiting to happen." Michael's phone rang. His boss, David, sounded uncomfortable. "Michael, I need to ask you about something. There's a Facebook post going around about you and some kind of accident." "It's not what it looks like, David. She's lying. I'm sure there's more to the story, but we have to be careful about the firm's reputation. Maybe it's best if you take some time off while this gets sorted out." Michael felt the walls closing in. Karen wasn't just suing him, she was destroying his life systematically, one relationship at a time. That evening, a knock at his door interrupted his spiral of anxiety. He opened it to find a young woman with auburn hair and intelligent brown eyes, holding a reporter's notebook. "Mr. Chen. I'm Amanda Torres from the County Herald. I'm doing a story about pool safety in residential neighborhoods. Could I ask you a few questions?" Michael's instinct screamed danger. "I can't comment on pending litigation." "I understand. But I've been looking into similar cases in the area, and I think you might want to hear what I found." Against his better judgment, Michael let her in. Amanda spread several files across his coffee table, each one containing newspaper clippings, court documents, and photos. "Karen Whitmore has been busy," Amanda said. "In the past 5 years, she's filed injury claims against 3 different neighbors, a grocery store, and a restaurant. Same pattern every time, minor incidents that somehow result in major trauma and substantial settlements." Michael studied the documents, his heart racing. "Are you saying she's done this before?" "I'm saying she's very good at it. Look at this case from her previous address in Riverside." Amanda pointed to a court filing. She claimed a neighbor's dog attacked her during a midnight walk. The neighbor settled for $75,000 rather than face trial. But here's the interesting part: the dog was 12 years old, arthritic, and had been dead for 6 months when the attack supposedly occurred. How is that possible? The neighbor was elderly, confused about dates. By the time the truth came out, Karen had already moved here. The old man died before he could pursue perjury charges. Michael felt a chill. She's a predator. She's a professional victim. And she's very careful about choosing her marks, single men, usually isolated, with assets worth pursuing but not enough resources to fight back effectively. "Will you testify about this?" "Help my lawyer." Amanda's expression grew sympathetic but firm. "I'm a journalist, Mr. Chen. I report the truth, but I can't become part of your legal case. However, I can make sure the truth gets published." After she left, Michael called Castellanos immediately. "We need to investigate Karen's background. She's done this before." "I'm already on it. Your insurance company is hiring a private investigator." "But Michael, this changes the game. If she's a serial litigant, she'll have learned from her mistakes. This case is going to be even harder to prove." Over the following weeks, Michael watched his life unravel. Karen's social media campaign had turned him into a pariah. His invitation to the annual block party was rescinded. Parents pulled their children away when he walked by. Someone spray-painted "danger" on his mailbox. But Karen wasn't content with social destruction. She was preparing for legal war. Her attorney, Victoria Marsh, was a predator in designer suits. She'd built her career on personal injury cases, specializing in maximum settlements with minimal evidence. Her first move was to demand Michael's insurance policy limits, $300,000, in exchange for dropping the case. "It's a bargain," she told Castellanos during their first meeting. "My client has suffered severe psychological trauma. Pool-related accidents often result in million-dollar judgments. Your client trespassed on my client's property," Castellanos replied evenly. "She has no legal standing. She was trying to help a neighbor she believed was in danger. That's Good Samaritan behavior, not trespassing. And the fact remains that your client maintained an attractive nuisance that nearly killed her." The depositions began in November. Michael watched through a conference room window as Karen performed her trauma for the court reporter. She wore a conservative dress, minimal makeup, and spoke in a trembling voice about her near-death experience. "I still have nightmares," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I wake up feeling like I'm drowning. The doctors say I have PTSD." "Mrs. Whitmore," Castellanos said gently, "can you explain why you were in Mr. Chen's backyard at 2 a.m.? I heard what sounded like breaking glass. I was worried someone was trying to hurt Michael. I know we'd had our differences, but I would never want anything bad to happen to him." "So you climbed over his fence?" "I tried the gate first, but it was locked. I was scared for his safety." "And then what happened?" Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone pushed me. I never saw who it was, but I felt hands on my back, shoving me toward the pool. I fell in and hit my head on the side. The next thing I knew, I was underwater, unable to breathe. It was a masterful performance. Even knowing the truth, Michael felt a moment of doubt. Karen had reconstructed the incident into a compelling narrative that painted her as a concerned neighbor and him as negligent at best, violent at worst. But Castellanos had been preparing for this moment. Mrs. Whitmore, you mentioned hearing breaking glass. Are you aware that Mr. Chen's security system records audio as well as video, and that no such sound appears on the recordings from that night? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Karen's face. Maybe I was mistaken about the sound. I was very frightened. And you said someone pushed you. The security footage shows you alone in the backyard. Who do you believe pushed you? I don't know. Maybe it was Michael. Mr. Chen was asleep in his bed, as confirmed by his phone's sleep tracking data and the security footage from inside his house. How do you explain that? Karen's lawyer intervened. Objection. My client suffered a traumatic brain injury. Her memories of the incident may be fragmented. But the damage was done. Michael could see the doubt creeping into Karen's performance. She was used to being believed unconditionally, and Castellanos was poking holes in her story with surgical precision. After the deposition, Michael felt cautiously optimistic. But Karen's lawyer pulled him aside in the hallway. Your client is making a mistake, Victoria Marsh said, her voice honey-sweet and deadly. We have medical records, witness statements, and photographic evidence. A jury will see an injured woman and The call came at 3:47 a.m., jarring Michael from restless sleep. The voice was professional, clinical, terrifying. Mr. Chen. This is Dr. Sarah Kim from County General Hospital. We have a patient here who's been asking for you. Karen Whitmore. She's been injured. Michael's blood turned to ice. What kind of injured? She was found unconscious in her backyard with severe head trauma. She's stable now, but she keeps saying your name. She claims you attacked her. Michael's hands trembled as he grabbed his clothes. I've been home all night. I can prove it. Sir, the police are already on their way to question you. I suggest you contact an attorney. The police arrived before Michael could even call Castellanos. Detective Rivera was a weathered woman with sharp eyes and the demeanor of someone who'd seen every lie imaginable. Mr. Chen, we need to ask you some questions. About your whereabouts tonight. I was here. Asleep. Check my security cameras. We will. But I have to tell you, this looks bad. Ms. Whitmore has a history of disputes with you, and now she's in the hospital with a skull fracture, claiming you assaulted her. Michael's phone buzzed frantically, news alerts, social media notifications, text messages from former friends. Karen's latest performance was already spreading across the internet like wildfire. The Facebook post was devastating, a photo of Karen in intensive care, unconscious, her head wrapped in bandages. The caption, posted by her sister, read, Karen is fighting for her life tonight. Her neighbor, who she's been trying to help through his obvious mental health issues, brutally attacked her in her own backyard. Please pray for her recovery and that justice will be served. Within hours, Michael's house was surrounded by news vans. Protesters gathered on his lawn, carrying signs reading, Justice for Karen, and Prosecute the Predator. His phone rang constantly, reporters, angry neighbors, death threats from strangers. Castellanos arrived looking grim. This is escalating beyond a civil suit. If she dies, you could be facing murder charges. But I didn't do anything. My security system will prove I was home. Michael, listen to me carefully. Karen Whitmore has just raised the stakes to a level where the truth may not be enough. She's created a narrative so compelling that even proof of your innocence might not convince a jury. That afternoon, Detective Rivera returned with a warrant to search Michael's house. They confiscated his clothes, his phone, his laptop. The security footage that was supposed to save him was now evidence in a potential murder case. The cameras show you didn't leave your house, Rivera admitted. But they also show you have a clear view of her backyard. You could have thrown something, used a weapon with range. That's insane. Why would I attack her? Because she was suing you. Because she was destroying your life. Because you snapped. Rivera's voice was matter-of-fact. I've seen it before, Mr. Chen. Good people pushed too far. Michael felt the walls closing in. Karen had engineered the perfect trap. She'd driven him to the breaking point publicly, then staged an attack that would look like the inevitable conclusion of their conflict. But that evening, Amanda Torres called with information that changed everything. Michael, I've been investigating Karen's sister, Jennifer Whitmore. She's been involved in Karen's schemes before, false witness statements, manufactured evidence. But this time, she made a mistake. What kind of mistake? The Facebook post about Karen's attack was timestamped at 2:15 a.m. But the 911 call reporting Karen's injury didn't come until 3:30 a.m. How did Jennifer know her sister was hurt before anyone found her? Michael felt a spark of hope. She was involved in staging it. More than that. I found security footage from a gas station 3 blocks away. Jennifer's car was parked outside Karen's house from midnight until 4 a.m. She was there when it happened. Will you give this to the police? I'm a reporter, not a detective. But I can make sure this information gets to the right people. The next morning brought a shocking development. Karen had awakened from her coma, and her first words were, captured on the hospital's security cameras. Did it work? Are the cameras rolling? A nurse, not understanding the significance, had replied, "You're safe now, honey. The man who hurt you is going to jail." Karen's response was recorded for posterity. Perfect. Now remember, you saw me practicing my victim voice, not my real one. The hospital footage was leaked to the media within hours. The public reaction was swift and brutal. The same neighbors who had called Michael a monster were now demanding Karen's arrest. The protesters outside his house melted away, replaced by reporters eager to document the unraveling of the year's most shocking fraud. But Karen wasn't finished. From her hospital bed, she played her final, most desperate card. I lied, she announced to Detective Rivera, tears streaming down her face. Michael didn't attack me. I hurt myself because I was so ashamed of what I'd done. I made up the lawsuit, the drowning, everything. I couldn't live with the guilt. It was a masterful pivot from victim to repentant sinner, trading a potential murder charge for sympathy and a lighter sentence. But Karen had underestimated the depth of the investigation her own schemes had triggered. The private investigators' report had uncovered something that changed everything. Karen's accident in Michael's pool hadn't been her first rehearsal. Ring doorbell cameras from neighbors had captured her practicing her drowning routine in her own backyard pool for weeks before the staged incident. More damning still, her phone records showed she'd been researching how to fake head trauma and self-inflicted injuries that look accidental in the days before her hospital visit. David Whitmore, Karen's ex-husband, provided the final piece of the puzzle. He'd kept recordings of Karen's phone calls during their divorce, conversations where she detailed her plans to move to a new neighborhood and to find a perfect mark for the pool scam. She said she'd researched the neighborhood extensively. David told Castellanos. She chose Michael specifically because he was single, had assets, and lived alone. She even studied his work schedule to plan her harassment campaign. But the most devastating evidence came from an unexpected source. Karen's own sister, Jennifer, who had been promised a cut of the settlement money, had secretly recorded their planning sessions as insurance against betrayal. The recordings were horrifying. Karen's voice, cold and calculating, laid out her entire plan. The key is to make him look dangerous while I look sympathetic. I'll push him until he snaps, then use his reaction to justify my fear. The midnight visit will establish that I was trying to help him, and the pool accident will be the tragic result of his negligence. What if he has security cameras? Jennifer had asked. Even better. The footage will show me falling in, struggling to get out. No one will think to question whether I fell or jumped. And if they do, I'll claim he pushed me. It's my word against his, and I'm the victim. The recordings revealed Karen's entire criminal enterprise, how she'd researched targets, practiced her performances, and coordinated with accomplices to create convincing crime scenes. She'd turned victimhood into a profitable business, and she'd been operating for over a decade. When confronted with the evidence, Karen's mask finally slipped completely. In the police interrogation room, she transformed from wounded victim to snarling predator. "You have no idea what it's like," she spat at Detective Rivera. "People like Michael, with their perfect little lives, their pulls and their parties. They deserve to be taken down. I'm not a criminal, I'm an equalizer. You destroyed innocent people's lives. I leveled the playing field. Men like Michael think they can ignore women like me, dismiss us, make us feel invisible. Well, I made myself unforgettable." The interrogation footage showed Karen's true nature, a sociopath who had weaponized society's instinct to protect victims. She turned empathy into a tool of destruction and used the legal system as her personal weapon. But even as the evidence mounted against her, Karen had one final surprise. "You think you've won," she told Michael during a confrontation arranged by their lawyers. "But I've destroyed something you'll never get back. Your reputation, your peace of mind, your ability to trust your neighbors. Even when I'm gone, you'll always wonder who else is watching, waiting, planning." Michael looked at the woman who had nearly destroyed his life. "You're right about one thing, Karen. I'll never trust the same way again. But that's not a victory, it's just proof of what you really are." Karen smiled, cold and unrepentant. "What am I, Michael?" "Empty. You're an empty person who can only feel alive by causing pain. And that's a hell I wouldn't wish on anyone." For the first time in their entire conflict, Karen had no response. The predator had been reduced to what she truly was, a hollow shell of a human being who had confused destruction with power. But the legal system was far from finished with Karen Whitmore. As the evidence mounted and her victims came forward, prosecutors realized they weren't dealing with a simple fraud case. They were facing a serial predator who had spent decades perfecting her craft, leaving a trail of ruined lives in her wake. The question wasn't whether Karen would face justice, it was whether justice would be enough to repair the damage she'd caused. And as Michael would soon discover, Karen's final gambit was about to backfire in ways she never could have imagined. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. News crews lined the hallway, and spectators who couldn't find seats stood 3 deep against the walls. What had started as a simple premises liability case had transformed into the trial of the decade, a public reckoning with the woman who had turned victimhood into a criminal enterprise. Judge Patricia Hoffman, a stern woman in her 60s, called for order as Karen entered the courtroom. Gone was the trembling victim from the depositions. Karen walked with her head high, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a navy suit that projected confidence rather than vulnerability. She had abandoned the victim performance entirely. Her new strategy was to present herself as a misunderstood businesswoman rather than a criminal predator. Her new attorney, Marcus Webb, was a high-powered criminal defense lawyer who specialized in white-collar crimes. Victoria Marsh had withdrawn from the case after the recorded conversation surfaced, claiming attorney-client privilege violations that everyone knew were really about protecting her own reputation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Webb began his opening statement, "my client stands accused of orchestrating an elaborate fraud. But what you'll learn during this trial is that Karen Whitmore is guilty of nothing more than being a savvy negotiator who understood how to work within the legal system." The prosecution, led by District Attorney Elena Rodriguez, painted a different picture. "Karen Whitmore isn't a businesswoman, she's a predator who weaponized our justice system against innocent people. Over the past 15 years, she has systematically destroyed lives, stolen money, and corrupted the very concept of justice itself." Michael sat in the gallery with David Whitmore, Karen's ex-husband, and 3 other victims who had come forward after Karen's arrest. Each had a similar story: escalating harassment, a staged incident, and financial ruin that followed. Together, they represented over $2 million in fraudulent settlements and legal fees. The evidence against Karen was overwhelming. The prosecution presented the security footage from Michael's pool incident side by side with the Ring doorbell videos of her practicing the same drowning routine. The contrast was devastating. In her own backyard, Karen moved with athletic precision, executing perfect underwater spins and dramatic surface breaks. In Michael's pool, she performed the exact same choreography, but with the panicked desperation of someone supposedly fighting for her life. These aren't the movements of a drowning person, testified Dr. Patricia Santos, a water safety expert. These are the movements of someone who knows exactly what they are doing. Notice how she positions herself to be visible to the cameras, how she times her struggles to create maximum visual impact. But the most damaging evidence came from Jennifer Whitmore herself. Karen's sister had agreed to testify in exchange for immunity, and her testimony revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. Karen called it the long game, Jennifer said. Avoiding eye contact with her sister. She would move to a new neighborhood, spend months researching targets, then spend more months establishing a pattern of conflict. The actual incident was just the final act of a performance that had been planned for almost a year. How many times did you help her stage these incidents? Rodriguez asked. 7 that I know of. My job was usually to provide an alibi or corroborate her story. Sometimes I would make the 911 call, sometimes I would be the witness who saw her injury happen. What made you decide to cooperate with law enforcement? Jennifer's voice broke. When I saw what she did to that man, Mr. Chen, I realized we weren't just stealing money anymore. We were destroying innocent people's lives. Karen had become something I didn't recognize. Something that scared me. The defense tried to portray Jennifer as a vindictive sister seeking revenge, but the recorded conversations made her testimony irrefutable. In Karen's own voice, the jury heard her planning each step of the fraud, coaching Jennifer on her role, and celebrating their victories with cold satisfaction. Webb's strategy was to claim Karen was mentally ill, a victim of her own delusions, who had convinced herself the incidents were real. He brought in a psychiatrist who testified about dissociative disorders and false memory syndrome. Karen Whitmore suffers from a complex psychological condition that blurred the line between reality and fantasy, Dr. Harrison Mills testified. She genuinely believed these incidents occurred as she described them. But Rodriguez's cross-examination was surgical. Dr. Mills, how do you explain the recorded conversations where Ms. Whitmore clearly demonstrates awareness that she was staging these incidents? Mental illness can be episodic. She may have had moments of clarity interspersed with periods of delusion. And the financial records showing she systematically invested her settlement money in real estate and stocks. Are those the actions of someone detached from reality? Not necessarily. Even people with severe mental illness can be functional in certain areas. Rodriguez introduced evidence that demolished the insanity defense, Karen's detailed journals, found in a safety deposit box that chronicled 15 years of calculated fraud. The entries read like a how-to manual for manufacturing victim narratives. Target selection is crucial, Rodriguez read from a journal entry dated 3 years earlier. Middle-class men with visible assets but limited legal resources. Avoid anyone with extensive security systems or legal connections. The ideal mark is isolated, trusting, and emotionally invested in being seen as a good person. Another entry, written just weeks before Karen moved to Maple Grove Drive, was even more damning. Pool cases are gold mines. Homeowners insurance companies always settle rather than risk jury sympathy for a drowning victim. The key is establishing prior conflict to explain the accident. Michael Chen checks all the boxes: single, accountant, risk-averse personality, visible pool, good neighborhood reputation to protect. The courtroom was silent as Rodriguez read Karen's cold analysis of her planned victim. Michael felt nauseated hearing himself reduced to a psychological profile in a predator's hunting manual. When Karen finally took the stand in her own defense, the transformation was complete. Gone was any pretense of victimhood or mental illness. She faced the courtroom with the confidence of someone who believed she had done nothing wrong. I provided a service, she said, her voice clear and unrepentant. I exposed the negligence and aggression that men like Michael Chen hide behind their respectable facades. Every settlement I received was compensation for revealing dangerous conditions that could have hurt someone else. Ms. Whitmore, Rodriguez said during cross-examination, you are claiming that you risked your life repeatedly to protect hypothetical future victims. I'm claiming that I held people accountable for their actions. Michael Chen maintained an attractive nuisance that violated multiple safety codes. His harassment and intimidation tactics created a hostile environment that any reasonable person would find threatening. What safety codes did his pool violate? Karen hesitated for the first time. I'm not a lawyer, but common sense, Ms. Whitmore. City inspectors found no violations. The pool was properly maintained, legally installed, and fully compliant with all regulations. Your own research notes, which we've entered into evidence, confirm this. You knew he had done nothing wrong. I knew he was dangerous. A woman's intuition, your intuition told you to practice drowning routines in your backyard for 3 weeks before staging the incident. The questioning continued for hours, with Rodriguez systematically dismantling every lie, every justification, every attempt at deflection. Karen's composed facade began to crack as she was forced to confront the evidence of her own calculating nature. You destroyed David Whitmore's life during your divorce, didn't you? Our marriage was failing. You accused him of domestic violence that never occurred, forced him to settle for assets he rightfully owned, and left him financially and emotionally devastated. Isn't that correct? David was weak. You did the same thing to Robert Martinez, claiming his restaurant stairs caused you to fall and break your wrist. But the medical examiner determined your injury was self-inflicted, wasn't it? I don't remember. You remember enough to have kept detailed journals about each incident. You remember enough to have coached your sister on providing false testimony. You remember enough to have researched your victims for months before targeting them. By the time Rodriguez finished, Karen's mask had slipped completely. The composed defendant had become a snarling predator, her true nature finally visible to the jury. People like you make me sick, Karen spat. You pretend to care about justice, but you're just protecting the system that lets men like Michael Chen get away with intimidating women. What did Mr. Chen do to intimidate you? He existed. He had things I didn't have. He was happy when I wasn't. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Hoffman called for order, but the damage was done. Karen had revealed the true motive. Behind her crimes, not justice, not safety, but pure, venomous envy. During closing arguments, Webb made a final desperate attempt to salvage his client's case. Karen Whitmore is a troubled woman who made poor choices, but she is not the criminal mastermind the prosecution wants you to believe. She deserves treatment, not imprisonment. Rodriguez's closing was devastating in its simplicity. Karen Whitmore is exactly what Th. 3 weeks later, Michael stood in the same courtroom for Karen's sentencing hearing. The gallery was packed again, but this time the energy was different, anticipatory, almost electric. Word had leaked that Judge Hoffman intended to make an example of Karen Whitmore. Karen entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, her perfectly styled hair now limp and unwashed. The transformation was startling. Gone was the predatory confidence, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Prison had already begun breaking down the facade she'd maintained for so long. But the real shock came when Judge Hoffman announced a surprise addition to the proceedings. Before we proceed with sentencing, the court has received victim impact statements from 7 individuals whose lives were affected by the defendant's crimes. We will hear from each of them. Michael hadn't expected this. The prosecution had mentioned other victims, but seeing them all together, David Whitmore, Robert Martinez, elderly Florence Chen, no relation, young mother Sarah Park, retired teacher William Foster, and 2 others, was overwhelming. These were the faces behind Karen's cold journal entries, real people whose lives she'd shattered for profit. David Whitmore spoke first, his voice shaking with years of suppressed pain. Karen Whitmore didn't just steal my money, she stole my ability to trust. For 5 years, I believed I was the abuser she claimed I was. I went to therapy, took anger management classes, wondered if I was losing my mind. She made me question my own memories, my own character. Even now, knowing the truth, I sometimes wonder if I somehow deserved what she did to me. Robert Martinez's statement was equally devastating. Karen's false slip and fall claim had forced him to close his family restaurant after 30 years. My grandfather started that restaurant with nothing but a dream and a borrowed $100. 3 generations of my family poured their lives into that place. Karen Whitmore destroyed it all with one lie. She didn't just take our money, she took our legacy. But it was Sarah Park's testimony that left the courtroom in stunned silence. Karen had targeted the young mother after a minor fender bender, claiming traumatic brain injury and demanding custody restrictions on Sarah's children. She told Child Protective Services that I was an unfit mother because of my violent tendencies, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. For 18 months, I could only see my children during supervised visits. My 5-year-old daughter asked me why mommy couldn't come home anymore. How do you explain to a child that a stranger decided to destroy your family for money? As each victim spoke, Karen's composure crumbled further. The woman who had shown no remorse during her trial was finally being forced to confront the human cost of her crimes. Her lawyer tried to maintain professional distance, but even Webb looked shaken by the testimonies. Judge Hoffman's expression grew stonier with each statement. When the victim impact statements concluded, she addressed Karen directly. Ms. Whitmore, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence? Karen stood slowly, her orange jumpsuit wrinkled and her makeup long gone. For a moment, Michael thought she might finally apologize, might show some glimmer of humanity. Instead, she looked directly at her victims and smiled. I regret nothing, she said, her voice carrying a hollow defiance. Each of you had something I needed, something you took for granted. I simply leveled the playing field. If you were too weak to protect what was yours, that's not my fault. The courtroom erupted in gasps and angry shouts. Judge Hoffman slammed her gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but Karen continued speaking over the chaos. You want to paint me as a monster, but I'm just honest about what we all do, we take what we can get. The only difference is I was better at it than most people. It was a breathtaking display of sociopathic arrogance that destroyed any lingering sympathy the court might have had. Judge Hoffman's face went white with fury. Ms. Whitmore, in my 30 years on this bench, I have never encountered such callous disregard for human suffering. Your complete lack of remorse demonstrates that you are a danger to society and unfit for rehabilitation. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the courtroom. On count 1, fraud in the first degree, I sentence you to 8 years in state prison. On count 2, perjury, I sentence you to 3 years in state prison. On count 3, extortion. The sentences continued, count by count, year by year. When Judge Hoffman finished, Karen Whitmore was facing 47 years in prison, effectively a life sentence for a woman in her 50s. But Judge Hoffman wasn't finished. Additionally, the court orders full restitution to all victims in the amount of $3.2 million to be paid from the liquidation of all defendants' assets. The court also orders that Ms. Whitmore be placed on the state's fraud alert registry permanently, barring her from filing any future civil lawsuits without court approval. The final humiliation came when the bailiffs moved to escort Karen from the courtroom. As she passed the gallery where her victims sat, she stumbled, whether from shock, defiance, or simple clumsiness, no one could say. But the stumble sent her crashing into the wooden barrier with a loud crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. For a moment, Karen lay sprawled on the floor, her orange jumpsuit twisted, her hair covering her face. It was the kind of undignified fall she had staged so many times before, but this time it was completely real and completely devastating to her image. As the bailiffs helped her to her feet, Karen looked around the courtroom with wild eyes, as if finally understanding that her empire of lies had crumbled completely. Her mask was gone, her confidence shattered, her carefully constructed image reduced to the pathetic reality of an aging woman in prison clothes who had just face-planted in front of her victims. The irony was perfect and brutal. The woman who had built her career on staged falls had suffered the most humiliating fall of all, from predator to prisoner, from master manipulator to broken convict. Michael watched Karen disappear through the courtroom doors for the final time and felt something he hadn't experienced in months: genuine peace. 6 months later, Michael's life had returned to something resembling normal, but better than normal. The media attention had brought unexpected benefits. Amanda Torres's investigative series about Karen's crimes had won a Pulitzer Prize and led to reforms in how insurance companies handle suspicious claims. The neighborhood had rallied around Michael in a way that restored his faith in humanity. Mrs. Peterson had organized a block party in his honor. The parents who had once pulled their children away from him now invited him to birthday parties. His pool, once a symbol of conflict, had become the neighborhood gathering place. More importantly, Michael had started a victim advocacy group. with David Whitmore and the other survivors of Karen's crimes. They helped people navigate the legal system and provided support for those dealing with false accusations and fraudulent lawsuits. But the most satisfying news came from Michael's lawyer. Castellanos called with an update that brought a smile to Michael's face. Karen tried to file an appeal claiming inadequate legal representation, Castellanos reported. The court rejected it without even holding a hearing. They noted that her behavior during sentencing demonstrated clear understanding of her actions and consequences. So she's really finished. She's finished. 47 years, and with her behavior record in prison, she's been written up 6 times for attempting to manipulate other inmates. She won't be eligible for early parole. Karen Whitmore will die in prison. Michael hung up the phone and walked out to his pool. The autumn afternoon was perfect, the water clear and peaceful. He could see his security cameras blinking their red lights, still vigilant after all these months. But he no longer felt like a man under siege. The cameras weren't there to protect him from monsters, they were there to protect his peace of mind. And for the first time since Karen Whitmore had moved next door, Michael Chen felt truly safe in his own backyard. The predator was caged. Justice had been served. And sometimes, the good guys really do win. In her prison cell 300 miles away, Karen Whitmore stared at the concrete ceiling and planned her next move. But for once in her life, there was no next move to plan. No victim to target, no scheme to orchestrate, no life to destroy. There was only time, decades of it, to contemplate the hollow core where her humanity should have been. And in that contemplation, Karen Whitmore finally experienced something she had never felt before, genuine helplessness. It was, perhaps, the only justice that truly mattered.